Neil?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Definitely want to.
There we are.
I think this is it. So,
Perfect.
Sandro, you can decide to use your go on audio or video. We loved either way. We'd love to look at you and presentation. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background, anything that you're interested, how you got into this stuff.
So, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm a fan. I want to say hello to your audience. I think they seem to be very, judging by your shows, they seem to be quite sophisticated. So I'll do my best to look smart or sound smart. So I'm from Cuba. I left Cuba when I was 12. Well, I'm doing this story of my life. I left Cuba when I was 12 to Dominican Republic. When I was 20, I got a scholarship to come here to study art. I'm not a biologist, and I don't pretend to be one. So I studied art at the New School University. I graduated in 2003. But besides that, I had the pleasure and the honor to study outside the New School with great modern masters, people like Nelson Shanks and Leonard Anderson. I always like to mention this because I think this was paramount to in my formation, and my background in painting is what enabled me to create this model. My training is basically on observation. I had the opportunity to look at that never-ending parade of naked people and do a lot of painting from the model. And one of the mantras these professors had is step back and look at the whole picture. Don't get stuck on the details. And I think one of the problems we have in science today is that we are sometimes caught up with tiny, whiny little details, and we sometimes cannot step back and take a look at the whole picture. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the mirror model. I do have some background in science. In 2009, I decided to enroll at the City College of New York for science. I studied there for 3 or 3.5 years. I got to junior year, but I dropped out. I never graduated. So I have some background in biology, physics, math, no, I don't want to see myself.
I don't want to see myself.
No, I mean, I don't look bad. I get self-conscious. How can I get rid of my image, you know?
Welcome to the May 19th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Sean, Matt, Will, Jim, Buddy, and Chris with our special guest Sandro Guerra, whose illuminating presentation of his mirror model gives us a direct connection to the dual filament nature of plasma and the development of life itself. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
So, where was I? City College?
I think so.
Yes, I dropped out, and I pursue this project, which I had since 2003. I decided to pursue this on my own. So let me tell you how this all came about. When I was at Parsons, at the New School University, Parsons is like a branch of the New School, I took a class on history of science, and I was fascinated. I was always fascinated by science. So when I graduated, I decided to take a class on the brain with Dr. Ginsberg, an expert in schizophrenia. And for some reason, during that class, I saw a picture of a pelvic bone with the guts exposed on top. And I say, gee, this looks just like a skull with the brain exposed. And that's what triggered the whole mirror model idea. After I dropped out from City College, I decided to sit down and put everything in order. I took the time to research and look for the things, for the links that would support or deny the parallel structures I was associating. But I think perhaps it's better if I show the presentation I made on video to get more deep on in the subject. It's on YouTube. It's called the mirror model as a project. It's a very simple idea. The thesis, the main idea of the model is extremely simple, and I think that's one of the things that design that good science needs. Simplicity.
Elegant simplicity. I think Wall would agree with you on that.
Without being simplistic, though. But
of course.
Can you see it now?
I can see. Yeah, I see it perfectly. I see everything that's on your screen.
Oh,
yep.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me
just. Yep. There you go. Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm gonna hit it play. Hello. My name is Sandro Guerra, and I'm making this video to talk about something I call the mirror model. So, what is the mirror model? The mirror model is a simple but bold idea about developmental biology. It is a model that synthesizes the incredible complexity of life onto an elemental equivalence principle, or what I call a mirror effect. And you may wonder, how is it possible to explain life with a simple model? Life seems to be everything but simple. The answer to this question is not too complicated. It is a matter of putting things in the right perspective. Very often in science, we are concerned with very tiny little things. Things like gene expression, molecular pathways, or homeotic boxes. All these things are indeed very relevant, but I believe sometimes we lose sight of the big picture. If we really want to understand this puzzle we call life, we have to take a step back. We have to take a look from the outside first, and then see how things are related as a whole. And that is precisely what we're going to do on this video. We're going to take a step back, we're going to look at things from the outside, and then we're going to see how everything relates to the details. The mirror model can be pictured as something similar to an equation. An equation is a statement with two parts, and even though these two parts may look completely different at first glance, they are just two expressions of the same principle. I believe something very similar could be happening in complex life forms. So, if the body, like an equation, consists of two expressions of the same principle, what could be these two fundamental parts? Based on the observations, the research, and the evidence I have found, I have come to the conclusion that these two parts are no other than the head and the rest of the body. Therefore, all the structures inside the head are iterated in the body. At first, this idea doesn't make much sense, and you may think this guy is probably delusional or he's high as a kite. The head doesn't look at all like the rest of the body. Furthermore, the brain is made out of nervous tissue, and the organs on the body are made out of a completely different set of tissues that have nothing to do with the brain. They don't even have the same origin. This idea also seems to contradict Ed Lewis' model of development by segments, which is the leading view of development today. I am of course aware of these apparent contradictions, but let's tackle them one at a time. First, how can I justify this tissue discrepancy? How can I get away with murder? To better understand what's going on, we have to take a look at the pre-embryonic process. We develop from a sandwich of three germinal tissues called the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. From the ectoderm, we get the skin, and we also get a tube that later turns into the nervous system, including, of course, the brain. From the mesoderm, we get the circulatory system, the muscles, the skeletal system, and structures like the heart, the kidneys, and the reproductive organs. From the endoderm, we get the guts, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines. If this proposition is correct, then the part of the ectoderm that creates the brain will be following the same instructions as the endoderm when it forms the guts, creating what I call a mirror effect. On the other hand, I believe the structures derived from the mesoderm also follow this mirror effect. But since they all have the same cytological origin, they don't show this tissue discrepancy. To better illustrate this idea, I have developed two catalogs of mirror structures, one of the skeletal system and another one of the organs on the body and the respective counterparts on the head. As I lay out these analogies, I will be discussing the reasons and the evidence that led me to these conclusions. Possible methods to test this hypothesis will be presented after the catalogs are laid out. The skull doesn't look much like the rest of the skeleton, but there is a hint that gives everything away. Ever since I was a kid, I have wondered, why is it that skeletons seem to have eye sockets on the pelvic bone? Now I believe that the pelvic bone seems to have eye sockets because they are indeed eye sockets. But now we have a problem. If the obturator foramina are the contraparts of the orbits of the skull, then we should have a frontal bone covering the abdomen. Fortunately, this is not the case, because it would be very uncomfortable to walk around with the frontal bone on the belly. But this helps me make a point. I don't believe all these alleged mirror structures are iterated on a one-to-one relation. Many of them could be partially expressed, they could be merged, or not expressed at all. Otherwise, an animal like a snake wouldn't fit into this model. This is precisely the case of the frontal bone. For many years, scientists and doctors have wondered why is it that we have so much bone marrow on the ribs and the crest of the ilium. If this proposition is correct, this will no longer be a mystery, because all the marrow on these areas will be there to form a frontal bone that is never expressed. I believe the white tissue covering the abdomen called the rectus sheath is also accountable as an expression of the frontal bone. Following this order, the ribs will be a contrapart of the parietal bones, the sternum and the manubrium will be a contrapart of the occipital bone, the temporal bones will be the ilium, the sphenoid will be a merge of several structures like the vertebral column and the sacrum bone, the superior extremities will be the maxilla, the inferior extremities will be the mandible, the pteriogoid plates will be a contrapart of the scapula, and the hyoid bone will probably be a contrapart of the clavicle. Even though the teeth are structures that develop from the ectoderm, I thought it would be a good idea to include them on this catalog, and I believe the most obvious contrapart of the teeth are no other than the nails. This is an artistic rendition of the skeleton arranged like the skull according to the mirror model. You may probably think this is all very sketchy, but if this mirror model is correct, there should be a genetic footprint of these analogies. So I have looked for syndromes, symptoms, and functions that support these symmetries. Tooth and nail syndrome is a genetic condition associated with the ill formation of the teeth and the nails, which, as you may remember, are parallel structures on this model. But one of the most important pieces of evidence on behalf of this idea is found hiding on plain sight. And I'm referring to the classic sample of the antennapedia mutation, which was the key to prove Ed Lewis' model of segmentation. Antennapedia is a mutation on the fruit fly that basically replaces the maxillar with legs. Rings a bell? I'm starting to see a pattern here, but maybe it is just good luck. So let's see how lucky we get when we look at the next catalog. Let's look now at the organs in the body and their respective counterparts in the head. The first organ we have, if we go top to bottom on the torso, are the lungs, and I believe the counterpart of the lungs is no other than the cerebellum. If we look at the structure of the lungs, we'll see that the bronchus branch out in a fractal manner. Likewise, the cerebellum has a structure called the arbor vitae that also branch out in a similar way. This fractal distribution is a distinctive trait of these two parts of the body. Now, the lungs are concerned with respiration. Respiration is not controlled by the cerebellum, it is controlled by the hypothalamus in an area nearby the cerebellum. However, it has been found not too long ago that deep nuclei within the cerebellum is responsible for respiratory modulation. The cerebellum is concerned with coordination, but if you ask any accomplished musician, dancer, or athlete, they would tell you respiration is crucial to achieve coordination. Furthermore, a study conducted at the University of Zurich by Dr. P. Bernasconi and Dr. J. Koch showed that the degree of coordination during running exercises can be increased significantly by paced breathing. So there's not only a physical resemblance between the cerebellum and the lungs, there is also a functional connection, and I think this is important to highlight. Right between the lungs we find the heart. At first, the counterpart of the heart is not so easy to identify, but the heart has a peculiarity. Unlike most of the organs in the body, the heart doesn't develop from the endoderm, it develops instead from the mesoderm. For this reason, it is logical to infer that the counterpart of the heart also has a mesodermal origin. After looking at several structures of mesodermal origin within the head, I have come to the conclusion that the counterpart of the heart is no other than the eyes. But not only the eyes, I believe the pineal gland is also a fundamental part of something I call the ocular pineal complex. It has been found that most lizards, frogs, salamanders, certain bony fish, and even sharks have a third underdeveloped eye that arises from the pineal gland. So the counterpart of this complex is not only the heart, but the heart and the thymus gland. In the case of the heart, each ventricle would be a counterpart of an eye. And if we look at a cross-section of the heart and a cross-section of an eye, we'll find striking similarities. Inside the heart, we find some structures called the papillary muscles and the cordiae tendinei. The function of these structures is to pull open the heart valves. Likewise, inside the eyes, we find very similar structures called the ciliary muscle and the thoracic fibers. And the function of these structures is to pull the lens to focus the eye. On the other hand, the pineal gland is also associated with the circadian rhythm or dream cycle, which I believe is a counterpart for the systoles and diastoles of the heart. The circadian rhythm and the heartbeat modulate the two largest electric fields generated by the body. The heartbeat modulates the electric field around the heart, and the circadian rhythm modulates the electric field around the head. But what if these fields are not the product of these organs? What if the organs are the products of these fields? It has been found that the process of mitosis involves charge. This is not well understood yet, but it has been observed that microtubules are charged when they assemble to connect to the kinetochores. This knowledge has enabled the development of cancer therapies that uses external electric fields to inhibit cell division. I believe the heart, the thymus gland, and the ocular pineal complex could be present as electromagnetic polarities even at the pre-embryonic stage, leading, through their fluctuating cycles, the development of the embryo. I also believe that the cell is a fractal version of the body, and the body a fractal version of the earth. This is all very interesting, but is there any evidence of functional connections between the heart and the eyes? It has been found that people with sleep deprivation are at a much higher risk of heart disease than people who sleep normally. This by itself doesn't prove much. What is truly significant is that heart disease can be spotted way ahead of time by looking for symptoms in the eyes. A study conducted at the American University of Beirut by Dr. A.M. Mansour has shown a clear correlation between congenital heart disease and ocular pathology. And this serendipity is something that should be taken into serious consideration. So, if you have ever heard that phrase that says, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly," now you know why. Right below the lungs, we have the liver. The counterpart of the liver is not too hard to identify, and I believe it is the pituitary gland. The physical resemblance between these two structures is remarkable, and they both serve endocrine functions and work as a team. Furthermore, it has been found that malfunction of the pituitary gland can lead to diseases like non-alcoholic fatty liver. Now, the gallbladder is a structure below the liver. Because of the position and the physical resemblance, I believe the counterpart of the gallbladder is no other than the nervus chiasma. Next to the liver, we have the stomach. From this point downward, and for reasons I don't yet understand, we're gonna have two instead of one counterpart for every organ in the digestive tract. I believe the yolk sac could be accountable for the missing counterparts, but I'm not too certain of this conjecture. Based on the shape and position, I have come to suspect that the counterpart of the stomach is a structure called the putamen. Next to the stomach, we have the pancreas. The pancreas is part of the endocrine system. Based on the shape, position, and function of this gland, I have come to believe that its counterpart is a structure we know as the hypothalamus. Following the stomach, we have the small intestine. And if we follow the putamen through the caudate nucleus, we'll find a structure called the hippocampus. For this reason, I believe the hippocampus could be a counterpart of the small intestine. After the small intestine, we have the colon. And I believe the counterpart of the colon is probably the most famous part of the brain. It is a part called the cerebrum. A study published at PLOS ONE by Qianhua Chen, Sheng Liling, and Xiahong Cao has shown a correlation between irritable bowel syndrome and dementia. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology has shown a correlation between the decline of cognitive function and colorectal cancer, and the condition known as autism has also been associated with problems in the digestive tract. It is also important to remember the intrinsic connection between the brain and the digestive tract. We have over 100 million neurons on the gut, and some scientists have referred to them as a second brain. For years, we have tried to understand cognitive function by studying the brain, but from the perspective of the mirror model, this is like trying to understand a soccer game by looking at half of the arena. I believe the process of thinking works somehow similar to the process of playing a guitar. To make music with a guitar, the player not only manipulates one side of the instrument. To play a guitar, the musician has to form chords with one hand while strumming the strings with the other hand. I believe something very similar happens during the process of thinking. I don't think thinking is about the way neurons are fired in the brain. I believe it is about the coordination of the neurons in the digestive tract and the neurons in the brain. And if we are able to understand the grammar of this relation, we may be able to understand how thinking works. The kidneys, like the heart, are one of these special organs that develop from the mesoderm. For this reason, it is logical to conclude that the counterpart of the kidneys also have a mesodermal origin. If the counterpart of the heart are the eyes, it would make a lot of sense if the counterpart of the kidneys are also sensorial organs. For this reason, I believe the counterpart of the kidneys are the ears. If we look at cross-sections of the kidney and cross-sections of the cochlea, we can certainly see some resemblance. But there's more. There is a syndrome called branchiotorhinal syndrome, or BOR. This syndrome is characterized for ill formation of the ears and the kidneys. Like the kidneys and the heart, the reproductive organs also have a mesodermal origin. If we follow this sensorial pattern, it is logical to conclude that the counterpart of the reproductive organs is no other than the olfactory system. Like the female reproductive organ, the nose is a highly humectated cavity. Now, there is two places in the body with a significant amount of erectile tissue. One is the penis, or the clitoris, and the other one, believe it or not, is the nose. It is also very important to remember the relevance of the sense of smell on the reproductive process. But there's more. There is a genetic condition called Kallmann syndrome. People with this condition are unable to complete puberty and have highly underdeveloped reproductive organs. But the important part is that these people have very little or no sense of smell, and I believe this fact should raise a flag. But there's even more. A genetic experiment conducted at Harvard University by Dr. Catherine Dulac also demonstrated a correlation between sexual behavior and the nose. This experiment is significant because it suggests that genetic modification could be used to test the validity of other alleged mirror structures. If we engineer variations of mutations like antennapedia, TSN, or BOR, and we extrapolate these mutations onto other parts of the genome, we should expect variations on parts of a phenotype predicted by this model. Another important observation we should do to test the validity of this model is to monitor the electric distribution of a fertilized egg through the process of development. If the circadian and cardiac rhythms are indeed electromagnetic cycles that guide the development of the embryo, these polarities should be observable in this experiment. The other experiment I'm going to propose relates to the alleged relation between the brain and the digestive tract. The brain is divided into functional regions known as Brodmann areas. I believe that if we observe the whole body performing discrete functions associated with the specific Brodmann areas, we'll be able to find counterparts to these Brodmann areas in the digestive tract. Now, on this video, I have presented a very radical hypothesis and I have covered a lot of material to support this view. So let's briefly summarize what the mirror model is all about. The mirror model postulates that the head and the body are two expressions of the same principle, that the ectoderm and the endoderm are following the same instructions but in opposite directions, and the mesoderm is also following this mirror effect but within itself. To support this view, I have looked for syndromes, symptoms, and functions that reflect this mirror effect, and I have found quite a few. Tooth and nail syndrome fits the model. The antennapedia mutation in fruit flies really fits the model. The role played by deep nuclei within the cerebellum on respiration fits the model. The reflection of heart disease on the eyes really fits the model. The reflection of pituitary malfunction on the liver fits the model. The correlation between dementia and irritable bowels fits the model. The affliction of both the ears and the kidneys by branchiotorhinal syndrome very much fits the model. The presence of erectile tissue in the nose fits the model, and the afflictions of the olfactory and reproductive systems by Kallmann syndrome also fits the model. You may say this is just circumstantial or smoking gun evidence, but this gun seems to have a lot of smoke. These coincidences are not trivial, they're highly significant, and there are quite a few. Now, I don't have the means to read and compare genetic sequences, but you may. That's why I'm reaching out for your help. If this proposition is correct, We should be able to get a lot more evidence by comparing the sequences of parallel structures. I have shown this material to many scientists. Some have been very receptive, some have been cautious, but some seem to be very annoyed by it. Statements like, "You're quoting nobody," "This is too simple," or "You should study more," are statements, they are not arguments. And so far I haven't received one single argument proving this model wrong. Science is not written in stone. It evolves according to observations. Yes, this model is very simple, and so is the fact that the moon is following around the Earth and the planets around the sun, and that Lewis' model of segmentation, and the decision Einstein had to take to get rid of absolute time without quoting anyone. All I can do is invite you to look through the telescope and show you this Rosetta Stone. It's up to you to look or not, but I believe the possibilities that can unfold from this idea are worth a shot. You can learn more about the mirror model and read articles confirming some of his claims at mirrormodel.wordpress.com. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
That was great.
Thank you.
I loved it. Anyone else want to comment right now? Because I think he's got some props. That was, I couldn't, yes, there you go, right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say I've watched it 5 times now, and I get more out of it every time. It's simple, but it is it's hard to catch all of the information first pass. That's for sure. I had to write some questions down and go back over it. But yeah, great job.
Oh, I noticed a few things immediately. Which would automatically support your theories, just by virtue of what you're talking about and what they're talking about. But before I want to jump into it, anyone else want to say anything? Because we have a few people on. We have Jim. We have Chris is on. We have Sean's here. I think it's your birthday, Sean, right? You're 50?
It was my birthday on Sunday, and I missed you guys.
Oh, we missed you too, bud.
I'll blame it on the wine.
It's all good. It's all good. And we have, I think it's Will. I think we have Will here as well. So anyway, you guys, anything you want to ask him right now? Let's just, I'd say jump into it, but I'd say I'm being polite. Go first. Yeah, that's what I mean. Someone go first because I'm going to start jumping into it here.
So this model seems to remind me of secret geometry in a way, and I'm just curious what really inspired you or led you to this model, and how did you develop it? What was the origin of this thought? That's my question.
Sure. So thank you for all the praises. As I was saying, I study art. I was interested in portraiture and figure painting, which was not at all the direction that the new school pushes people. But at the same time, I was studying art. I took a class on the brain, and for some reason, I found a picture. Let me see if I find it. Of the guts of a skeleton with the pelvic bone exposed and the guts exposed. Can you see this? Am I sharing my screen?
Yep. Oh, I'm seeing it.
Something.
I got it.
So that I said, gee, it looks just like the brain on top of the skull. That was a trigger. I always, since I was a kid, I noticed that the pelvic bone and this hole that I call the obturator foramina had a resemblance with the eye sockets. And I just said, well, whatever, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. But with time, I started to reconsider, and I started looking into it, and I started to find all these symmetries. I know there's like a lot of hermetic principles that may coincide, like as above, so below. But that's not precisely what I had in mind. It happens to coincide with the model. And yes, I think there's some sort of symmetry and some sort of coherence in the world, and even in the things that happen to you.
Well, considering
Sense of reality. But this was a very pragmatic observation, and it's just very simple. There's not much to it, but I think you can certainly relate it to a lot more deeper concepts of hermetism and sacred geometry and so on.
Well, you don't even have to go that far. Let's just be fair. You could say it's just simple. It's just opposites. It's simple.
Yeah.
Well, okay, sure, but let me just go and tell you what else is simple. Charge attracts each other, but in that charge attracts each other is literally everything, because you have the right-hand rule. There's a twist involved. Suddenly, what the heck's going on? Charges are dividing. You're having a myriad of events occurring, different ways of discharge, different things on a voltage curve. Suddenly you're generating different types of light, different types of energy, all of that simply because positive and negative like each other. Mm-hmm. So that's literally all of electromagnetism. Maxwell's laws just are that right simple right there. But there is that simplicity to see that extended onto the human body. And not just human, of course, anybody, really, because I can see, I started immediately thinking of, well, does this also apply to cows? Let's just be fair. Does it apply to cows? Let's take a look.
But my point is it applies to most complex life from.
Of course, yeah. Just in my mental thoughts, I was agreeing with you, is what I was saying. Even if I thought about a cow, I'm like, yeah, those little loops still occur in a cow's hips. This occurs here.
Right, that's where my thoughts were too. Like,
I mean, there's 7 stomachs, admittedly, but they're all one big tube. And what does that do to the brain of the cow? Does the brain of a cow have different features that would belie its the state of its organs? That's another good comparison, species comparison, I mean. So,
Neil, now you got me thinking about the platypus, because that creature's got some crazy functions right there. Look at the platypus brain and then see, because it's just so odd. It's such a strange creature.
I'm actually biting my lip because I actually have a whole thing to go on to here.
Or an electric eel, or like this opens up a whole new range of I don't even know.
It doesn't open a can of worms, or it doesn't unleash a bag of cats. It literally redefines worms and cats.
Well, like neural research, this opens up whole new fields for neurobiology and neural research, because if it is indeed true what you're saying, then you should be able to find these mirror cavities inside of the creature that are inside of their brains.
Yes. And actually, I want to thank you again for having me on the show to show this bizarre theory. I have been 7 years knocking on science's door, and science is not there. I have sent thousands, probably tens of thousands of emails, and I've done many applications, but people just disregard it. I like to make a few comments.
You're very welcome, and well, just telling you right now, I see nothing but a truth. Like I don't mean it. I don't mean it as like some sort of religious thing. I just mean it seems, as people who enjoy the electric universe or plasma cosmology in some degree, the recognition that life should also follow similar functions.
Symmetry.
Yes.
Symmetry principle.
It should, even though it's developing within this field as you defined, as you described. This field has certain rules, certain, it has intrinsically into it a sort of a ratio with the golden ratio somehow sort of fits into there. No matter what animal, no matter what plant, it seems to grow in a certain way that seems to be defined by this. there's other things like that, because we see that also in space, that symmetry there. And so to imagine this also happening, not just on a cellular level, which it's very apparent, as you pointed out, right and left, and then a divide in the middle, and there you go. Same thing, but this is a much larger creature, but still obeys a certain rule that life should follow. And I didn't see the divide in that initially, but I thought it should always be there. It was, what? I'm speaking too much. I'm going to let you go. I want to go into a bunch of stuff.
You're saying the right things. And actually, I was concerned because the show is more about electromagnetism and physics. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going to bore your audience a little bit with all this biology. But core of the mirror model of this model is physics. It's based on electromagnetism. And I'm glad you mentioned all that, because I think the engine of what drives this symmetry principle is electromagnetic. As I mentioned on the video, I think there's two main organs or two main principles that guide this symmetry effect, which are the heart and the what I call the ocular pineal gland, the eyes and the pineal gland. So the heart produces the cardiac rhythm, and the circadian rhythm, or the dream cycle, is not well understood yet, but it's being associated with the pineal gland and the intake of light through the eyes. So
what's really interesting? I just realized we have two heartbeats as it goes tunk tunk, and then I just realized that naturally, not today, but naturally, and I have had the luck of growing up with grandparents who only got power in the last part of their lives. So, as such, they slept differently than everyone else. They didn't have power, so nothing woke them except for the sun. So as such, they went to sleep, they would wake up, go out, have a tea, and eat a couple biscuits and play a game of cards in the middle of the night, and then they would go back to bed. And they did this every friggin' night, like clockwork. And and it's been mentioned in the past, and I mentioned on the show as well. It's just something that, if you mention, it's a connection, and I'm often stunned by this. It's very interesting.
So I have a very good connection to draw in with the heart-eye connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this strange ability that came upon me in 2005, where but I felt something in my heart, and I started to realize, well, there's a story that goes along with it, but this isn't the time. But anyway, so I felt this feeling in my heart, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And then I felt it in my hands, and I'm like, this is really strange. So I went into the mirror, and the story that surrounds it is also phenomenal. And I do this thing to my heart, and my pupils dilate. And I think I might have shown this to Neil in person. I've shown this to people, and I Google it. I mean, literally, I expand my heart and my pupils dilate. I can do it on command anytime.
Really?
Yes.
That's certainly very connected with what we're talking here.
Exactly. So I Google it, and Neil or someone, if you want to Google it real quick. Anyway, nonetheless, so I Google it, and I find out that other people have this ability. This is a real thing.
What's the name?
Eyes expanding on command, maybe. Expanding pupils, contract pupils.
Pupil dilating on command.
Pupil dilation on command. But so check this out. I've never met anybody. I've met two people who can do this in person, and one person who can contract them. And it happened to be a woman, was one of the biggest bitches in the world. And she was a hater. She hated everyone. So I think that expansion, because your eyes take in light and your heart takes in light, and that goes through the pineal. So that goes right through with the three things that you were talking about. So that's all I have to say about that. And we can read
emotion and the effects of the heart. I mean, there's a term for being so friggin' angry that you could literally rip someone's head off, and that expression is called seeing red. So, I mean, right there. I mean, that's part of history. It's an expression. I mean, there's an expression for a reason.
So I think honestly, you hit it right on the nail on the head there, Sandro.
Sandro. Thank you. My goal is to make experiments. So we don't make experiments. Hello?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm hearing an echo. But anyway. So, yes, my goal is to make experiments. So I think I have a fair amount of evidence, and that's what gets me so frustrated with scientists, that I do have this whole collection. And by the way, I have a blog called mirrormodel.wordpress.com where you can go. And on that blog, I have a whole list of these syndromes, symptoms, and functions documented with articles, with links to articles that support, with all the evidence that support this model. But my goal is to take it to a university or to an institution with the resources to make this. And I'm proposing 2 observations and 1 experiment. And science, it's built on experiments and observations. You cannot just, I think the head is a body. It doesn't work like that.
No.
But I certainly, I'm going to take a note of what you're saying. Dilating, what is it called? Voluntarily dilating pupils. That's interesting.
Yes. Yep. And I'd love to hear if Chris has anything to add to this, because he showed an image earlier that he shared on a group of ours, and it has to do with CMEs, and the shape that they take also resembles the shape of the pre-embryonic layers that you're talking about. He shared it yesterday, and I just shared an image of it to us on this group.
Well, I can't show everyone.
Yeah, some research I've been doing lately is aligned with what you're saying here. You had shown early in your presentation there how the electromagnetic field is responsible for the operator of cell division, right? So when the chromosomes separate, they follow the lines of electrical charge, and then the membrane is, the Z pinch is where the cell divides. And the magnetic field that results, right? So it's a Z pinch type of process that divides chromosomes. So I think you're right on the money with that one, and I've been doing some research on basically the incoming frequencies from the sun. We're immersed in the sun's field on a dielectric planet, right? So we're made of dielectric materials, calcium, water, with a few electric materials, iron and carbon. And the frequencies is what drives the form. It's where I've been going with my research. So I was wondering.
Well, that's precisely where I'm going. By the way, can you send me after the show? Can you send me the research you're doing or some material that is related to this, because this is very important for what I want to put together.
Sure.
I gladly have some. I have some great things to share already, and there's still definitely number one. I think that before I go anywhere else, the person who should probably be talking to is Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. Now,
I've talked to him.
You have talked to him.
Yeah,
He did not like what you had to say, or
he is a skeptic.
He is a skeptic. Okay,
but in a good way. He's been far more polite than any other scientist.
Well,
bring up that image there.
If nothing else, that's good to hear.
Image.
I was hoping he would be, at least if nothing else, not mean to you.
No. He's a gentleman, and he's been very receptive, and he has been patient, and he has listened to what I have to say, and I think he has taken into consideration. But not to the point like, hey, here is like money for research.
I suppose, but it's it is at least someone you can go, okay, well, someone like him might know that type of thing. Like, that's where that goes for me is it's a matter of knowing someone who could say, well, actually, I know a guy and he's doing some research on this very similar thing, or whatever that could help with this. We should probably get him in here or something like that. That's just the thoughts I have, but still.
I'm a big fan of his work, and I think he's a terrific scientist. And I think, one of the people who has inspired me is Dr. Sheldrake, and I have nothing but respect for him. But respect for him, and I think the mirror model can actually give a lot of answers, or can be complementary to his idea of morphic resonance. And let me finish with the concept of the circadian rhythm and the cardiac rhythm, because this is key. This is the engine, the center, the nucleus of the model, and it has to do with what you were saying about electromagnetism and not sacred geometry, but the geometry of the universe. There's this force called electromagnetism that drives many things. Anyway, so being in the mirror model, the eyes and the pineal gland, the counterpart for the heart and the thymus gland, I assume that I infer that the circadian rhythm or the dream cycle is a counterpart of the cardiac rhythm or heartbeat. But I think that the organs, these rhythms, these cycles are not a product of the organs. I think the organs are a product of these cycles, and I think these cycles could be actually what guide the process of development, because the cell, as Chris was saying, there's a relation between charge and mitosis, and since these rhythms imply, in the case of a heartbeat, you can see in an electrocardiogram, there's a peak in every heartbeat. And in the circadian rhythm, there is a dip every time to go to sleep. Of course, the length of these rhythms are quite different, but I think maybe they start as one or not, but I think they are from the very beginning in the pre-embryonic stage, and through these electric fluctuations, the body informs the cell of what does it has to do, when does it have to divide, why does it have to divide, what does it have to turn into. I think this is the director of the orchestra that drives and organizes life. And the way I think we can do it to verify this is to monitor the electric distribution of an embryo. I'm not sure if we have the technology to do this, but if we can see the voltage in a microtubule, it's probably likely we can have equipment to measure and monitor the distribution of the electric activity of the embryo through the process of gestation, from the blastocyst to conception. And that's central. That's one of the experiments one of the observations I want to do. And I think that's not too complicated. And
no, I think that could be done. That seems reasonable. But
we have to look.
Also, the trouble is, though, is of course you might be. I mean, obviously, developing creatures don't respond well to days and days of X-rays either. So, I guess there's that.
Creatures don't respond well to what?
X-rays and stuff like that, because you're going to have to be examining it. So like you might actually cause a cancer or something, or that's all. I mean, they're probably going to be mice or something. So I'm not exactly like that's going to
or chicken egg.
There you go. Yeah,
micro electrodes. If you have an electrode that can measure the voltage in a microtubule, it's something very, very tiny. You can measure. You can take a bunch of electrodes and measure what's going on in an egg electrically, and that's my idea of how to test this idea. if this is in fact true, you will see this electric fluctuation, these peaks and downs and valleys, and that's not very hard to do. I don't know if you have, by the way, if you have any other ideas on how to test this model, by all means.
Well, I'll let. I know you, Chris.
To me,
oh, sorry. Go ahead there, buddy. I was going to get Chris to finish his statement there, but go ahead.
yeah, that's kind of where I was headed. I really want to see what Chris has to say, because in my mind, it seems like there's like frequencies and tubes that are creating these. The filaments are leading to certain places inside of bodies, and that's what's creating the mind fields for them to turn into an ear or a leg or a limb, or because they're growing these organs also. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Well, it's interesting. You talked about some of the association with how the ear functions and the fractal nature of that. And inside of our ears, I know there's the microtubules that are like made of carbon, and they sit on a little bit of calcium. So there's a calcium-carbon kind of capacitance in the ear, which is in a fluid, and into that little fluid, it's like a little sac. But coming into that, it's a 6-axis tubes, right? And so there's 6 tubes that come into this little sac, and it acts as a gyroscope in each ear. So that's how we get our balance. Is an electrical differential between the dielectric fluid and the carbon and calcium within the eardrum, within the ear. Right? So and that's tied into our brain. So that's how we know up and down, all of our senses of force and everything else, right? So it's definitely that aspect of it, and as well, we've seen in experiments where you can have the water going between two cups of water, and you put a charge through it, and you build a water bridge.
Yes.
And to me, that's very similar to like how neurons form and other the vesicles and capillaries in your body. Right, the charge goes down the tube, and then there's a stiffening of the sheath around the current, right, and then that's where it stiffens.
Not unlike a tornado. Like
a tornado, nerve cells flow, the whole 9 yards, right? So I think your idea is right on the money, and it's also the mirror model, right? There's a right and left in charge, and there's the way the cell divides is the right and left, and when the cell divides at the center is your Z pinch in the field, right? And it draws from the external field. Like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eric Dollard and a few of those guys, but
I've seen a couple of his videos.
So if you go back to like Leibniz, some of that work, the theory is that the electricity in the conductor is actually coming in from the outside, not down the center necessarily of the conductor. Right? We provide a path, but the current coming in is actually external from the field itself being placed. As we consume the electricity from the battery, then the current comes in from the outside.
From the yolk sac, is it?
Yeah, it comes in from the outside.
Okay.
The outside of
from the outside. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a boundary condition set up, right? So maybe Neil can speak to some of that if that's
something I want to say. Life runs on electricity, but all cells, everything has a differential potential. But that's the way biologists understand life. The way I personally see it, I don't see the cell as a unit of life. And that's a fundamental difference between me and the rest of biology. I'm not a biologist, but anyway, I think that life, it's an electromagnetic phenomenon.
That's the way I see it too. Like I see it as an emergent phenomenon, right? It's actually the field and the electric fields that we're immersed in is actually determining the forms that we create, right? And we develop into. It's emergent.
That's a fundamental. That's a fundamental shift of consciousness or of perception of how life works, because it's very hard to create life out of nothing, which is the standard view today. But the point, the way I see it is, life is there. Life is electromagnetic, and we just having to embody life. We're like the small bag of life, within a sea of life. It's not like just life appears with us. It's very hard to justify such a thing as complex as life created out of nothing, while all the way around makes a lot more sense. I want to add to what I was saying, that I think maybe we have these two main poles, these two main rhythms, the circadian and cardiac rhythm, that I believe exists in a pre-embryonic in the pre-embryonic stage. But I think maybe like the sun, you see the poles of the sun, how they divide. I think likewise the body could create some subpolarities, and those subpolarities could be responsible for the formation of our organs. But more importantly, I think we are actually a fractal. I think that, and this is related to what you were saying about this similarity, that everything seems to have an order in the universe, and a pattern, and this polarity between positive and negative. I think we are a fractal. The cell has two centrioles, right? I think we are the eyes and the heart are the fractal version of the centrioles in the dividing cell, and likewise the poles in the Earth and other planets and the sun, and even the sun, are a fractal version of the same phenomenon that repeats over and over and over again. And I think that's central to understand life.
Oh my gosh, you just blew my freaking mind. That right there. The name of my company is Love is Watching. And and this comes from the ability, sort of, I mean, part of it partially from the ability to do that weird thing.
I get it now, buddy.
Yes.
Love is watching. Thanks. Yeah. Love is what eyes and heart again.
And the geometry, literally the geometry of Birkeland currents, is the Doherty set. Literally, like I took it to Donald Scott and I had him review my geometry, and what he said about it was resilient. He said it was as if you were inside of a Birkeland current and you could see all of the intricate details that his model predicted. And so you see the similar geometries in your work and what you're showing off, and what you just said literally allows for a universal internet interface networking system to be assimilated.
It's very simple. It's like, if Beethoven or Bach sounds very complicated, but once you look at it's the same over and over and over. It's layering of the same concept, and it's just sounds very complicated, but it's in essence very simple.
So the sun is watching. So the sun is so the Earth is like the heart, and the sun is watching, and the sun is like the eyes. Right?
Maybe you could show Sandro the image there of the CME that I had shared earlier and see what he thinks of.
I've actually been sharing it. It's on, but of course, just to the viewers, not to you guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I cannot do both.
I don't know if Sandro sees the image or not.
I don't see any. I don't know how to. I'm I'm very amateur in Skype.
That's totally fine. But yeah, as soon as I saw that, Chris posted this, and this article came out yesterday, my birthday, and I was just like, I'm like, that's what Sandro's talking about. So to get everyone together, I'm really excited right now, and this, I'm happy. Thank you. You just literally extended what my theories were about something that I call the I3, the Internet 3, and it's the this gentleman, what's his name, Jeffrey West. Jeffrey West talks about scaling, and he wrote a book called Scale, and it talks about how all systems, it's the universal laws and principles of life and death and of cities and networks and companies. And the scaling laws of these things fit together very well with what you're talking about as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You had him on the show?
No.
Oh.
No, but yeah, definitely. Well, by researching, well, what I was getting at is these are some theories that I have based off of looking at the Doherty set and studying this for 16 years now this year, looking at it and trying to understand what it is. And I know that love is watching, but I couldn't understand exactly how everything's connected. But now that all this electric universe stuff is starting to connect, literally, like there's a larger organism and a living system of living streams of water that's building the whole universe. And like your model describes, now there's bigger creatures. And I keep coming back to this and wanting to name these like circuitous paths, like they're Langmuir currents, in the ocean but in the sky. And there's so many of them, they can't all be called Birkeland currents. You know, there's like Scott currents, Donald Scott currents, you know. Terrence is on this stuff.
It's just scale.
You think it's a natural phenomenon, right?
Well,
this is just natural. Yeah, it's just how life is living, and it breaks down recursively on all scales, and that's what fractality is. Dan Winter's on this. Dan Winter's talking about it, and it's very biological. It's a biological approach, a rational biological approach to this reality that we live in that doesn't involve the simulation hypothesis that they're shoving down our throat.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
And I'm telling you what, I can't stand this because I know what's going on. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants
rant. We got to talk about more of the stuff, though.
Everybody thinks that wants you to think that it's a video game and that everything and everyone can be programmed. But I think it's a lot more organic and living, and thank you for your presentation.
Those who study analog will probably have a lot more understanding of the universe and the way that it works, because it's not exactly like something that can be programmed. It could be tuned, not programmed.
Yeah.
Like you could, it's like going down the road and it's like, well, we're going to listen to heavy metal and you're going to get to work and you're going to have a crappy day, unless, of course, you happen to find heavy metal music therapeutic. But still, or you could just, you could sort of have a tune. You can but that setting yourself, music can do that very nicely. We're lucky to live in an age where we can do that instantly. Want to listen to whatever tune we want. I can't imagine what that would have been like to live in a place where what I would have do to go hear someone play a piano. Like if in the 1700s, it's like they play a piano, I'm going to live at their house. Even if they don't let me. I just want to hear some music, for God's sake. But still.
So now your next direction is like Laodicea. Where's the eyeball and the heart of Laodicea? The larger supercluster galactic part of the universe that we're in.
Well, we've already established some of that, because the duality actually occurs if you go with Holt and Arp, one of the forebears, they talk about ejections from galaxies, and the fact that it usually happens in pairs. One goes out the north, one goes out the south. I don't know if this is ironic or not, or coincidental, but Jupiter is behind you on the wall. I can see it. And yes. Jupiter is one of those planets where you can see the rings. And if you notice that the rings go in opposite directions on either side of the planet, and the center is where you get the most turbulent action, obviously, not unlike a cell. So, and you'd have flows going in different directions in both poles, because the right-hand rule goes in different directions depending on the flow. So then, of course, you have the outpouring along the center, basically out towards we call the Van Allen belts on Earth, or rings, I guess, depending. But playing with that, just to touch on what you've actually, some of the things that I've noticed immediately was when you talk about nerves to add to your, before you came along, long, long ago, there was there was a notion that all of the nerves on the body are actually on the face as well.
Yeah, it's the Chinese approach.
Well, it's not necessarily untrue though. There is actually there's a notion that some of the nerves going down, especially along the jaw, and can be reacted to, touching parts of your hand. And we used to do that to stop headaches, for example.
But it's more. I think it has more to do with meridians, which is channels of energy that are in your body that don't necessarily travel through the nervous system, but travel through some sort of channel that is in your body that relates. It's like a fractal. Your head, it's in your hand. The body is in the hand. Like the middle finger is the head. The two fingers are the arms, and these are the legs. And the mirror model actually has some correlation with the Chinese medicine. I just don't mention it because it's too spooky and
well,
not.
Ramon will love you. He's actually Ramon, one of the people who is on the show a lot now. He does acupuncture. And he's also very much into Chinese medicine, so this would be great. I wish he was here.
There is not consensus. I find there's not always consensus because some people tell me that yes, the nose are related to the penis, and some people tell me that it isn't. But everybody agrees that the ears are related to the kidneys, and that's one of the reasons why I leave it out. Nice. And I want to concentrate on things that you can actually test, and it's very hard to test Chinese medicine or Chinese.
Well, fair enough. I was thinking more on the. I only saw a sort of like a documentary or something that involved involving face bones and parts of the body with regards to nerves. So I didn't know. I didn't know it stemmed from Chinese medicine actually. So that's very interesting.
Maybe we were talking about something else. I just went to a conference that was related to.
Well,
to
if
Chinese.
I find it and it's a scientific paper and not based on some sort of stuff.
No, even if it's not, I love to see it.
Oh yeah, I'll see if I can look at it. Another one I noticed. Julian James, when you started mentioning dividing, immediately comes in because they talked. He's a big fan of. You said thinking has to be something that goes from left to right across the brain, and he because of the way that you have to hold a guitar, for example, those type of things. And you were referring to the thinking has to be a similar function, and Julian James would totally agree with you. He's the spirit of the show Westworld, I guess, and his idea is that there is two parts to the brain, and that one of them allows you to ride on top of the other. For example, one allows you to think that you are you, and you have an imaginary eye that you can imagine yourself in different places, but the other you is actually the one driving the car or the one that's walking down the road or that type of thing. It's usually subservient to you. But obviously, in certain times of stress or shock, it could become dominant. Those type of things. And, this type of idea on what that might mean to thinking because it has to do with both sides of the brain. I just thought that was interesting.
Yes, and that's important. And actually, when you split the corpus callosum, which unites the two hemispheres, sometimes you can find people who
epileptics do that, right?
In the past, but it's very very clear because it's dividing the left from the right hemisphere. And when you cut the corpus callosum and you divide the two hemispheres, there's people who the right hand stop the left hand from doing something and try to choke and to kill yourself, and it's very weird. But that's what I'm saying here, and this is related to the idea of the instrument you were talking about, which I totally agree with. We are literally like instruments, but not only we are the instrument, we're also the musician. What I'm saying is that most scientists try to understand how thinking works by observing the brain. And from the perspective of the mirror model, this is like trying to understand a soccer game by watching half of the arena, like half of the TV, painting half of the TV, and seeing the soccer game. You don't understand anything. I think to understand you have to look at the whole body. And I think the process of thinking involves pretty much the mainly the neurons in the gut. I think the process of thinking is about the coordination between the neurons throughout the digestive tract. We have around 100 million neurons throughout the digestive tract, and there's this Dr. Harrison from Columbia University. He wrote a book about it, and it's not understood yet. But I think we have to look at what's going on at the same
Well, you've
time.
heard about dinosaurs anyway. They have a brain in their bum. What was that about? So
on the gut.
no,
Well, we have a brain.
they talked about that in a. I remember when they learned that. Like I was like, what? But yeah,
Well,
apparently
we do too.
the Stegosaurus has a nerve cluster down near its tail, or it did, obviously when it was alive.
We do too.
Well, I assume that they probably figured something like that must have. I'm a little bit behind the times, but
Well, they say we have a second brain in the stomach. Of course, we have over 100 million neurons in the digestive tract, and people don't understand why we have so many neurons in the digestive tract. I think we work like a guitar. To play guitar, you don't play only around the box. On one side of the guitar. To play guitar, you have to coordinate the arm of the guitar, the fingers on one side of the guitar, to what you're doing on the other side. I think the same is true in the body, and the bottom part of the other part of the guitar will be the gut. That's why when you get angry, when you have anxiety, when you have all these stress problems, you have all these problems with the gut. And I bring this example of colorectal cancer and the IBS and autism. One of children with autism is they have problems in the gut. They have parasites. They have leaky gut. They have inflammation in the gut.
yeah, I heard that.
And they can think properly because the other part of the brain, or the control part of the brain, is not working well. And even if people who are tetraplegic, who has impairment of the function of the neurons in the gut, have changes in cognitive function and have changes in the personality, and these changes have been determined or is believed is not a result of the trauma of a psychological trauma, but of a physiological change. And I think to prove this, and I think actually we have Brodmann. It's like a guitar. What you do on one side affects what you do on the other side. If we want to understand how we think, we have to look at the whole picture. And the experiment that can be done is very easy. You can just use a EEG, electrodes on the head and electrodes throughout the body, and do experiments that involve specific Brodmann areas. Actually, all the experiments we have done to think how to observe how thinking works, but observing the whole thing. And if we understand the pattern of what's going on in the gut versus what's going on in the brain, I think we will finally understand how thinking actually works.
Wow.
And I think it has a lot to do with emotions.
Well, yeah, and of course, because you just spoke it yourself when we were talking about it, because we're talking about not just what you're consciously aware of, but what you're not thinking about, and that thing wants to express it to you. Sometimes it can give you bad feelings, but usually those bad feelings are associated with a feeling in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
And that's
you have
intuition.
a gut feeling. Which exactly, intuition is the other. Yeah, well, I wasn't saying it was anything but that other part, basically going, "Hey,
Right.
think about this. Be cautious."
Well, Nikola Tesla and Einstein were talking about with intuition,
or
and
you get nervous and you get butterflies.
They say it's superior to any other type of information processing.
I
say that
can't think on an empty stomach. Oh my God! I can't learn.
You
Jesus!
can think much better on an empty stomach if you go through the trauma. I just did it. I, I went through a very, very strong ayahuasca experience shortly, and after the experience, I, I stood like a few days only eating like very little fruit and juice, and I noticed that my thinking was a lot more clear. But you have to go beyond the illusion of hunger. It's an illusion, and in the trip you feel it very you can see or you can perceive your thirst or your hunger, and you kind of are behind it. It doesn't bother you so much. I don't know how it works, but it was it was a very strong experience. I died. It was huge. And one of the things I understood is that we are like an instrument. It's about tuning the instrument and keeping it, keeping it, keeping it tuned. So that's why the healthcare system doesn't work. It's more about lifestyle. Health is more about your lifestyle. If you lose the balance on your lifestyle, you can take a pill and kind of trick it back into health, but it's not about that. It's about restoring the balance in the whole thing. But anyway, one thing I wanted to mention about thinking. I think there's a hierarchy in the way we think, on how this works. We're born with perception, right? We can perceive hot to cold, from hot to cold, from red to purple, from soft to hard, from loud
Depending on the organ doing its thing, yeah.
And we have scales of feelings, of perceptions, scales of perceptions, and from those perceptions we develop feelings like love, hate, not hate but fear, what else, and even more complex feelings, empathy, anxiety, stuff like that. But you develop those feelings from your perception experience, and on top of those feelings, you develop what we understand like in the intellectual, like cognition, complex cognitive functions. But the complex cognitive function is really subservient of our feelings and our perceptions.
Yes.
It's serving.
Often we will justify using our thinking as opposed to thinking and then
thinking
acting.
Is great, and feelings are girly. No, there's a hierarchy, and actually, there was a guy called Francisco Varela, Chilean neuroscientist. He used to say like what we understand as complex intellectual functions are just like the cherry on the ice cream, or the icing on the mountain. Below that, there's a more intrinsic knowledge and tacit intelligence that is what life really is, and the intellectual scheme or intellectual schemes are just like the surface of this. It's a construction that we make to survive and to interact with the world in a coherent way. That's why I don't believe so much in computational on AI. AI is, I mean, unless you develop something that is alive, you're just making computation. You can make very sophisticated computation, but not intelligence, because intelligence for me is life. It's not distinguishable from life. And I think that is also central to understand this model. I actually think that the rules that we use to build the body from the pre-embryonic stage are actually the same rules we use, or the same tools we use for perceiving the world. I think the perception we have of the tools we use to perceive the world are the same thing we use to build the body. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, no, it does make sense. In fact, I think you are literally proving epigenetics' point, where they say that if you have certain environment and you toss some stem cells in it, they'll turn into muscles. If you toss some stem cells into that environment, it will turn into teeth. It will turn into brain.
And you can reproduce.
And it's
and you can reproduce sound too.
So,
you can take the image of something and reproduce it in a sound wave, and it'll record and ascertain that shape that it once was in.
Well, I suppose, yeah, we actually do hear that. That's very weird. I do notice that you can, in fact, it's a very small group of music that you can actually tell that in. Like, it has to be basically recorded on certain material from, like, 1971 to 1979. Everything else is pretty much...
Yes.
Well,
I was talking about on a genetic scale.
I was actually talking about music and the fact that when you can use your ears, and you can hear the studio if it is that well of recording, if you know what I mean. You can't do that on certain tracks that are engineered. It's just not done anymore, is what I meant. Sorry.
I think you're definitely going in the direction of validating some epigenetics and some morphogenetic fields. Definitely.
Clearly.
Scott, can I jump in for a second, please?
Sandro had touched on the epigenetic connection between the gut and the environment, right? The bacteria in our gut and how critical that is to our, basically how processed food and nutrients and so forth. But it's actually passed on from the mother to the fetus, like in utero, right? So we actually have that bacteria at the time that we're born. And so something that Sandra might want to look at is that connection between the bacteria in the gut and the environment itself. Mm-hmm. And there's also another one that's an ancient virus, apparently, that we still carry in our brains, that they're now saying, at least some of the latest research, is that it may be in part responsible for what we perceive as consciousness. There's a virus that actually connects between the synapse and the neurons in the brain. And when it does so, it carries RNA from one neuron to the other, and in essence, that gives rise to memory, because it's actually transporting information across the neurons, but it's a viral type of process. So it's something you might want to look into.
Yes. If you can send me a link, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I dropped a link to that article in the side chat there, so you can pick it up later if you want to take a look at that.
Okay.
So, Sean, you wanted to say something, or?
Yeah, so then, that's what jumped at me through that video, the gut-brain connection. And a lot of us miss it, especially, I have an autistic child. So he's 15 now. So, this is something that I've been dealing with for years. And it seems that everything we talk about, the simple solution would be there's some type of mineral imbalance in the gut. And what would balance it out if we're electrical beings, but alkaline foods? And we don't consider that.
Yeah. What's your name?
Alkaline foods.
No. What's your name? I see S.A.
My name is Sean. My name is Sean.
Sean. Okay, because I didn't know who was speaking. Maybe we can talk. I have some experience with autistic children. Maybe we can talk after. And I have a we'll talk after.
Yeah, and I got my information from a guy named Dr. Seavey, who's pretty popular, a cult figure, if you will, who's a holistic type doctor, and he made that connection years ago between all types of mental illnesses, if you will. We don't consider there's a mineral imbalance in the gut at all, or that we're electrical beings, and that the plants around us are electrical, and that we do eat a lot of meat. At least I used to years ago. But that might not be the best route for us if we're electrical beings. It would be a higher alkaline diet. And I started pumping these mixtures of herbs to my son, and it helps him tremendously.
Of course.
He's not chubby as he used to be. He started growing a little different, but nonetheless, we noticed a definite change in him when we looked at the gut rather than the brain by
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We treat all types of mental illnesses with chemical-based drugs, essentially. Here, take this, take this, take this, and we don't really know what these chemical-based, pharmaceuticals really do. I mean, there's clinicals that show what it should do. Does it always work that way? No, but it's just something real simple. Alkaline foods, alkaline-based herbs, because we're not connecting the gut to the brain at all. I mean, that just jumped at me right away in your video. Like, yeah, I mean,
I had heard from someone that there was they basically said there was, with regards to this, the only other person who talks about autism was not with regards to alkaline foods, but a similar function. It was a research. I can't remember. She was a dietitian, basically, was her thing, a nutritionist. And one of the things that she said is that as you said, the inflammation in the gut was a big something that people noticed, obviously, with autistic children. And so she went on to figure out what that was by doing tests. Eventually figured out it was likely caused by these types of metals. And she said, okay, well, the best thing to do then is to put things in that neutralize those metals, and then go through treatments until finally we could see if each one improves that situation. I thought that was very interesting on a technique, because it was very similar to what you were mentioning, with regards to, because alkaline and base and acid and so forth, and metals obviously appear there, so it just comes to mind.
So I got an idea, or I got a question here, I guess. My mind goes global and thinks of like weird, larger pictures and whatnot, fractal invariants, but this God idea of like Yahweh, Elohim, would you say that this could be possibly a local star configuration, or like the local membrane wanting us and desiring us sort of like to understand that the power doesn't come through and from us, but there's an outside source, and when you connect with that outside source, you have that power coming through you even more at a higher magnitude, and like there could be multiple gods at different clusters that are, sort of have their own area in Laodicea. Someone proposed this idea to me, my friend Phil, before, where our local god, and but there's lots of them. But like
I think you're going a bit over his head, because because I can follow what you think you mean. If you know what I mean.
Well, it's something that, if you go into Hindu tradition, Vishnu and the avatar, they also have this perception of there's a primordial being, and then there's beings that are like gods that create sub-universes. To begin with, define God.
Well, yeah, that's why I said it was a Western, approach. But yeah, keep going. What you're talking about is interesting.
Well,
the question, the question of defining what God is, or even better, how God is important, but it's essentially impossible. You cannot probably define what God is. I can tell you all my experiences with things like mushrooms and ayahuasca, which don't do very often, but I have done recently. And what I have experienced, and I know it sounds probably a little bit hippie happy, and I'm not a lot hippie happy kind of person. I have my problems with this all this love and hey brother and peace, because the world it's far more complex than that. But in these stages of consciousness, what I have experienced is this hippie happy idea that everything is one, we are all connected, and like the best way I guess I can describe it is like I am a drop. I am in the oceans, and I am the ocean. It's very hard to explain.
Actually, that's literally how it's explained in a Buddhist proverb. Well, that's literally what he says. In Taoism, it's not important to note that you are a leaf on the river. You are the river.
Mm,
And that was a very interesting analogy. You're not even a drop. You are part of it. You're inseparable from it. You move and change with
yes.
it.
There's no death. You are this consciousness. We're like a bag, like a small part of this consciousness, but at the same time, the whole thing. And
I understand what you're
somehow there's type
saying.
of death,
I
but
understand what you're saying, that
it's really an illusion, or that is what I perceived through this experience. I don't know if it's true, but that was my perception, and it's something very hard to put in. It's very hard to put it into words. It's something that needs to be experienced.
one of the things that to bring it back, since it looks, we've been going on for a while, but something that brings this whole thing to a close that is very interesting that someone noted. There's a gentleman who runs the site called macroevolution.net, and I don't often bring this up because it's a little weird, but he noticed certain things with regards to crossbreeding. He's an expert in bio. He's a doctor of biology as an expert of hybrids, and in his work, he discusses specifically when you notice there's a difference between a liger and a tyon, even though a tyon and a liger are made out of the crossbreeding of a lion and a tiger. And the reason they are is because it depends on which one is the male and which one is the female, because that depends on who gets the head and the body, because one will have the head of a lion and the body, and not immediately the parent, okay, but more characteristic traits of. And this thing starts, when you mentioned the platypus, buddy, this is what I was thinking. Duck-billed platypus looks like a beaver and a duck. How the heck that happened? Then you also have other situations that are similar to that with regards to other crossbreeds, and it's not lost on that effect happening. So the question becomes, he's basically saying, well, not all hybrids die off, and in times of great stress or disaster, you would be more inclined to let hybrids live than you would normally, because normally we would kill them off. And that's not being rude. I mean, it's just natural. If you see a weird looking pig, you're going to go, well, that thing's weird, and they're just going to kill it, right? And,
they don't well as well. They can't breed successively through generations.
Well, this is the whole thing, right? And they don't even know what happened to it. They might not even judge it. They don't even think it's a hybrid, but they just kill it off. But the idea is that hybrids could exist, and they can live and it has to do with heads and bodies a lot, which has to do with what you're saying with regards to which one gets. And that could have to do with them not living so well until.
That's very interesting.
Because
staying off the head.
Well, then you would have an off-balance body. Like if a tiger and a lion are very close, but and I'm not giving an example of this, but a horse and a hawk are completely different. So to imagine, no matter how you would make the crossbreed between them, if it was to actually happen, it would be so different to itself. I can't see how it would electrically, if it was one half of that cell was from the hawk and one half of the cell was from the horse, and they were put together and they grew, well, it's quite possible that it wouldn't grow very long. It would be inviable very quickly. I agree. So, but he's suggesting that evolution might be a process of that type of thing. That was not directly, of course, but it was weird. And I thought that was
interbreeding.
Well, just in general, like that type of thing. But he's not talking about anything recent, of course. But just way back when
he's talking about ancient mutagenesis during the Cretaceous and different spawns of different trees of eukaryotic life.
Yeah. So he's mostly into plants, but and obviously, I mean, hybrids of plants is not so weird. But to think about it I just noticed this connection when you mentioned that there is a brain and a body connection, and there's a divide right there. I was like kind of taken back by that. That was kind of weird, because to see that connection, that was the first thing I thought of, was like, wow, Because, I mean, I knew this about a lion and a tiger and how that happens. And now we know.
So
now we know. This proves it almost.
Well, my thoughts now go directly to when there's an extinction events and speciation, rapid speciation events afterward.
Well, that was what he thought of too, because he said these species that would never ever try to interbreed would try to interbreed to survive, and if one lived, the pack would say, "Well, we'll leave you alive because we need your
made
hands."
It through the storm, weathered through the storm. But what's weird is that everything, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, almost everything dies during these extinction events and then is retransmuted into new species, propagating in almost the same volume as before, but new species afterwards. So this tells me that there's some sort of transmutation through, I say, possibly fungus or lichen, or a combination of both. Like almost like the memory of the creatures go into the fungus and the lichen, and then come back out of it to propagate.
You know, this is the plot of a movie, right? Have you watched this movie?
Well, there's
Ben Affleck's in it. It's called Phantoms.
Yeah. I did some research along that line, buddy, there, and I was trying to figure out. This is a bit off topic, but I was trying to figure out why there's the iridium, the concentrated iridium content in the KT boundary layer, right? And you guys are aware that I did some research through my job,
right?
My former career for sulfur-reducing bacteria and different types of bacteria, right? Basically the black carbon types of bacteria that we find in oil deposits and deep earth drilling. And so I found some supporting evidence that there is, in fact, an iridium-reducing bacteria, and it's in high concentrations at the KT boundary layer. So during a cosmic event, it would seem that during that extinction event, there was a high concentration of bacteria afterwards, and that created that black layer on the KT boundary layer and concentrated iridium. So I'm also thinking that...
Wait. So a bacteria, the iridium layer was caused by a bacteria that pooped iridium.
Well, it reduces because of what it eats, right? It eats. I have to look up the paper, but basically, it's a reduction function.
I'm cool with that, by the way. No.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen them. Yeah. I've seen bacteria eat everything. I've seen some that just run off electricity. So what do I know?
Oh yeah. Like what happens is the bacteria. There's a strain of bacteria that's sulfur-reducing bacteria, right? So it basically eats sulfur, but as a byproduct, you end up with a concentration.
Wait. It eats sulfur?
Yeah, there's one strain that eats sulfur.
Try it sometime.
Right, so it's a two-way function, right? So there's one bacteria that'll eat sulfur, and as a byproduct, you get iron concentration. Then as a symbiotic, there's another bacteria that eats iron and basically reduces it turns it into sulfur, essentially, right? So it's that electrical, it's a chemical reaction. So there's one that you end up with a reduction in a concentration as a result. And I found one that does the same type of function with iridium because of the bacteria.
Want you to talk next before you go. If you're going. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, so as a result, you get a concentration of iridium in the KT boundary layer because of the presence of this bacteria. So, and I was thinking that during these events, you get spontaneous mutagenesis as a recovery, right? So as the species all try to recover, and the bacteria is taking in this RNA, right? Because it's rich in RNA. So like what he was saying, the bacteria is breaking down all the biologicals and dead matter and everything else.
And sulfur, by the way, because sulfur is somehow, and I don't know why, but as far as we know, electricity, massive electrical strikes seem to leave sulfur as a thing, as a residue, and Io is a perfect example. It's been slowly been etched for so long, and it's just covered in this stuff. So
then what happens is, during these events where you have a high concentration, so for example, the magnetic field gets extremely weakened during a grand solar minimum type of event, and the weakening field allows in more cosmic radiation. But cosmic radiation, we know, will actually break down DNA and RNA, causing mutations in the species. So on the recovery, when the species starts to recover, you get all these mutations and hybridization and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So it's a rapid.
I wouldn't surprise me at all.
So it's like a safety trigger for nature, right? So on the recovery uptake, you get a lot of mutations because of the incoming cosmic rays, which gives an enhanced chance of survival, right? So it just spontaneously a rapid speciation event after an extinction event.
According to people like in the catastrophist circles, there's a lot of big ideas that Saturn came by every 26 million years, for example, because for some reason 26 million years, conventionally speaking, geologically, it seems that we were just the planet was just wiped clean somehow. You know?
Yeah. The Yuga cycle.
I have no idea what it was. The screw you everything on Earth cycle, I guess. I'm not sure.
No, it was the I'm going to upgrade my system. Wipe my booty, bitch.
No, it's God's going to keep on hitting the reset button. No, one of these is going to give me pizza pockets. I swear to God. Anyway, Will, you were going to say something? That's what I'm feeling. I'm going to get pizza pockets out of this. Anyway, Will, sorry, you typed in a great big thing, and I want to give you a chance if you were taking off. So I wanted to make sure you get a chance to say something.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that, Sandro,
Yes.
You seem to have, I guess I'm trying to speak metaphorically, have cracked a barrier in a way. Just independently of your own accord, you've come up with your own independent way of seeing things, and you've discovered this, and it resonates with all of us individually.
Well, I want to do experiments and observations before I say, oh, use code. But thank you, appreciate it.
Oh,
It's a beautiful thing that once you see the world in the paradigm of electricity playing a dominant role, that it somehow like attunes our brains individually into like insights and intuitions into things that resonate with everyone else. That like, we're like, oh, how did they come up with that? And it's like, well, they were tuned into the creative source, and it's I can't commend you enough for having the insight to bring this to us all. It's really a beautiful way of seeing
I didn't
things.
think you were all going to be so open to it. My experience
It was the
before-
plants. It was the plants that taught him.
Oh,
No.
yeah. Actually, I think we are actually literally like thoughts of the Earth. Like, and I think this idea of evolution is not
Whoa.
completely. Probably it may not be complete. And you were talking a while ago about evolution, but I think there's few things with evolution that we see discrete species, right? But it's hard to see the transition between one species and the other species. That's something that we don't quite understand yet. I think, well, the Darwinism, the natural selection, what it says is that through small mutations, we turn from one species into another. But there is not much of a fossil record of the transition between one species and the other. That
yes.
remains a little bit of a mystery. I believe maybe, I don't know, but maybe changes in the Earth. We know that there's polar reversals in the Earth. Maybe changes in the Earth electric field could be triggering in a few generations the evolution that we believe takes thousands of years.
That's the Ebner effect right there. You just described it.
That's how I think maybe we are just an expression of the Earth, and this thing is not separate from the sun and the sun from the galaxy. It's all integrated, but it's integrated electromagnetically. That's my perspective.
Actually, that's one of the reasons why me and Jim and others were having conversations with regards to what would happen if we decide to have a baby on Mars.
Mars has a very weak electric field, right?
Look,
or not at all.
Just the first thing out of your mouth is all I needed to say. That's all. See how you think that way? It's not what, oh, well, where would you get water? Or can you grow things out of your own poop? No, none of that. Not about air. Nothing about like just straight up electric field. I wonder if it will be born the same way. I don't know if it will turn into a baby. I mean, it will look, I don't know what will happen. I honestly have no idea how the thing will grow. But
that would be a good experiment to
yeah, an involuntary one, because I probably won't know that's coming.